pleasure to start this round of session about let's talk about Ambrosia, and I'm going to present you the work we performed these last years about using citizen science to tackle and try to reduce the number of populations of ragweed, common ragweed, and try to prevent the real invasion of our region. So, okay. So some words about citizen science. Maybe some of you are familiar with that. Maybe some are not. So citizen science, it's quite simple. It's just engaging people in collecting data for a scientific purpose. So if you try to have the participation of the general public, then you are doing citizen science. It is something that is increasing more and more. People are using this approach, and it has been widely used in research related to ecology, environmental related aspects. And it is possible thanks to emerging or already well-established technologies. And typically smartphones have been very useful to have the possibility for people to collect data on species they see, on trails they use, on meteorological data, and many things like that. So this approach is useful. It has been shown in the literature that this approach is quite useful, and there are many advantages. And probably the biggest advantage is that it is cheap, because if you have to engage, if to hire people, a staff to collect the data, you have to pay them. It can be quite expensive. But if you use volunteers, just people who are okay to record data for you, then of course it is much cheaper. It's not always fully free. You might have to pay for some data, or you might need some training and so on. So we will touch upon that after. But definitely it is quite cheap. And it also enlarges the possibility of data collection, because there are things you can do using citizen science with that you cannot do without, especially in terms of spatial coverage. But also a big advantage is that you create an interaction between scientists on one hand, and the general public, or specific communities on the other hand. So it is part also of science diffusion, and it helps raising awareness about the problems you try to face with your science. So typically environmental related problems, but also health related problems, or things like that, can be better understood by people if they try to engage in that and they are curious about this aspect. So these are real advantages of the approach. And it is also a, let's say, a secondary advantage, is that for many tools that you can use in citizen science, the more you use them, the better they are, because with the machines learning and the algorithms that are behind those tools, if you create more data, they have more data to be trained, so they get more and more efficient over time. So these are several advantages. It might not be a full list, but these are obvious advantages. But of course, this approach has some drawbacks as well. It's not a perfect approach for science because of different things. Actually, there are several projects and various protocols in citizen science, and not all of them always use the same type of data or record the same type of data. For plants, for instance, you can use just an occurrence data, but you can also have information on the phenology or on the number of plants in a population, but you don't find this information everywhere or on all data. So this can be a limitation. Also, there are several tools to use to make citizen science, notably different online or application online tools, or smartphone apps that can create some burden or some complexity, and there can also be some delays. We will talk about a specific case after. Some platforms are not, let's say, real time, so you have a delay between the time the data is created and the time the data is available. So these are more like technical aspects, but there's also several bias linked to citizen science. They are well known. First is the fact that people, when they collect data, they don't use a systematic sampling or a random sampling. They just collect data where they are or where they go often. So the sampling is not uniform. You have more data where there is more people that either they live or they do have activities. So the geographic aspect is not uniform. And there's also a bias in terms of species. Generally, people like to record species that they know about or that they like. So typically birds are often well recorded, whereas, let's say, snails are less well recorded because people don't care that much about snails. For plants, they might record more big trees that are easy to see, that are very easy to identify, and maybe less some plants that are more difficult. So there is a non-uniform species selection as well. And there can be also identification errors because the citizen scientists, they are sometimes not that well trained to species identifications, and there are groups that are difficult to identify. So so that can be a problem as well. You have mistaken identifications. And finally, another drawback or another limitation is that the precision of the location is not always good based on the GPS unit of the smartphone, for instance, or if people go on the website and locate something on a map, they may not be very precise. So all these, of course, are limitations, but you can try to solve these problems. For instance, if you use occurrence data only, it's less a problem to have various levels of data because you always have an occurrence. So it means you know that this thing was there at that time. So that's a typical data that you can have most of the time. For the sampling bias, there are statistical tools that can allow you to reduce the problem. And for the identification errors, there are more and more. You can find apps that help you to identify something, be it a plant or an insect, a bird, based on pictures, based on even on sounds and things like that. So those algorithms are getting more and more efficient, so it becomes easier to identify. But it doesn't solve everything, but you can also solve many problems by training people. So citizen can be trained to better collect data that are useful for scientists. So this is a key aspect. So this is for citizen science in general, but we want to talk about Ambrosia today. So what I'm going to present you is the way we use this. Sorry, well, my phone. We can use this citizen science to tackle the invasion, so to try to prevent this invasion to increase in the territory. So it's a project that started 4 years ago. We have 4 growing seasons behind us, so we start to see really the trends, and it takes place in southern Belgium. So if you are not familiar with Belgium, so we are in Western Europe, and the country is separated in 2 main regions, and we are talking about the red region here, the southern part, because it's a regional funding for us. And this area is somewhere in the invasion range of ragweed, but we are definitely not like countries more in the south or in Central Europe where there is a lot of Ambrosia. We are still somewhere in the beginning of the invasion. That's what you can see here. If you look at different maps, you don't have exactly the same information. And that's because we still have a relatively low level of invasion and we don't have that much pollen. So based on different information, based on the literature, I can summarize that the species is present, the species can form populations and can flower and produce seeds. So that's clear, but the levels of pollen in the air are relatively low or even very low. Here you have the on the corner. That's in French. I just found it on the report. It tells that there is less than 1 grain of pollen of ragweed pollen per cubic meter of air. So that's really low. So we have we have the plant, but we don't have the pollen problem for the moment. And that's a situation where typically the cost of inaction is much higher than the cost of action, because if we don't do anything, if we let the species prosper and disperse through the landscape, we will have problems with the pollen. So we don't want that. And the cost of action is therefore much lower. And because the situation of invasion is still, let's say, reasonable, we have a strategy of search and destroy. So the strategy is really to find, ideally, all the populations and destroy them. So that's the goal. We might not reach that goal at the end, but that's the strategy we try to have. It's like a tolerance zero. We want to remove all the populations that we can find. The destroy part is quite straightforward. You probably, some of you probably know about ragweed control and eradication. It's not an easy thing, but there is a lot of literature. There are guidelines, there are books to tell you how to do it. So we know relatively well how to do it. Here you have pictures on the small populations. We just pull out the plants, put them in plastic bags and dispose them safely. So that's what we do the most, just pulling out the plants several years if needed. But so the destroy part is quite straightforward, but the search aspect was more tricky, because we cannot go everywhere in the territory to try to find ragweed. They are not so visible, so you need people in the field. So that's where citizen science comes into play. And we are quite lucky because there is already a lot of tools available for citizen science in general, in our country, but in general as well. And those tools are have different, let's say, advantages as well. But I would say that iNaturalist, that you might know, is the most global one. It's at the planet level. You can download it everywhere. All the data are free, so it's really open sourced. This is quite typical. It's really like biodiversity occurrence. Citizen science. You have your smartphone, you just make a picture of something, a plant, an animal. There is an algorithm that helps you identify it, and once you know what it is, you click on the record, and then you create a data of this species was there at that time, and then it can be validated by others, by other users, and then it becomes a, let's say, a science grade data because it has been validated by 3 peers. Observations.be is another platform that is quite the same. It does roughly the same, but it's more local. People typically used it for bird watching, but it can be used for whichever species as well. So it's roughly the same. The validation system is a bit different, but they are, let's say, concurrent applications with also websites. You can also record on the web. So these are ideal. ways of using citizen science. But there is also the possibility to record on a regional portal. There is an application that you might know that is called PlantNet, that is firstly dedicated to species identification. It's probably the most efficient tool or application to really identify a plant, but they were not thought to create occurrence data. Now they do. They do create also occurrence data, but the problem is that they publish the data at the end of the year, so they don't publish it in real time. So for the moment, it's a problem in our case because we know that there was ambrosia at that place, but we are in the winter, so we cannot manage it anymore. So there is a delay. That is a problem because we want to go in the field as soon as possible, and ideally before the flowering and typically before the plants disappear. And it's also possible simply to contact us through Facebook, through telephone, through email, and so on. It's also citizen science if somebody calls us and tell, I have seen a ragweed plant at that place. So we do create the data in the platforms ourselves. What is efficient is that all these tools end in GBIF, so not the tools, but the data created by those tools and the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, GBIF, that you probably know, which is like a giant database of species occurrence. But also there might be some delays between the time the data is created and the data it is available on GBIF. So based on that, one could say that you just have to let it go and just wait for people to record ragweed. But if you look at the ragweed data in our country or the surrounding regions, actually there is not so much data because people don't really either recognize the plant or they are not used to record plants that are not super visible or that have something special. So that's why we had to create a workflow to be more efficient in citizen science. And the big thing is that you have to explain the problem to people. So people will not do it spontaneously. You need to train them so that they are able to identify the plants. They know the platforms they can use, the tools of citizen science. They know the problem, so they know it's something important for public health and so on. So they do. So to reach this level of training, we had to make a lot of science diffusion and training. So with posters, brochures, articles in journals, many things. Also trainings in auditorium, training for the identification, so people can really have plants in their hand with the lookalikes and say, oh, this is ambrosia, this is something else. I do see the difference. So when I'm in the field, I will not make confusion between the species. Also try to target specific public like naturalists, botanists, farmers, and so on. We participated to a lot of different activities to reach those people and have them engage in citizen science. So and we also have a Facebook community that helps us. So we have roughly 500 followers, and those people are more aware and they share the information. They speak about the problem of ambrosia. They share our. We make videos, we make things. So it helps a lot to reach as much people as possible. So the idea is that those people, when they are trained and they know the problem and they know the plant, they can use either smartphones or websites to record the plants. So it goes in the databases, and we have a daily or weekly follow up of these databases. And once we have a data, we make an information check. So based on the pictures, or on a call, on a phone call with the people. We want to know if it's really a ragweed that they have seen. We contact the landowner to see if it's possible that he manage himself. For instance, we have populations of 1 or 2 plants. So in that case, they can remove it themselves. When it's a larger population, we go and help them, or we do it ourselves, and we make the population control. And we also contact them the following years to see if the species is still there. So if the population is persisting, or if the population has disappeared, and we consider that it's eradicated if we don't find the next year. Of course, we try to still look at those populations, but once we don't find anything the next year, these populations are not priority for the next seasons. So the big question is, does it work? So is it an approach that will help us not have ambrosia, or not that much? So first, do people record ambrosia? It works quite well, actually. Of course, we would like to have more people recording more, but you can see here that over time there was like 2 different trends. So this is the cumulative number of recorded populations over the last 23 years, so since the year 2000 to 2001, actually. And you see that before we created the Ragweed Observatory, so before we started the project, there was a linear rate of record, but this, after the project started, this is still linear, but with a different slope, and much more records occur every year. So it means that we manage to have people record more when they see ambrosia. So that's a good thing, because if people don't record, we don't know where are the populations. So here you have some numbers, so you can have an idea of the problem and the size of the problem. We had 78 records before we started, and when we visited those 78 sites, we found actually only 25 populations that we managed. And after that, each year we have roughly 27, 20 something populations recorded every year. So that was the case in 21, that was the case in 22, and this year, for the moment, we still have only 19 populations, but we still have records now. Every week we have 1 or 2 records, because unfortunately people record more when they are flowering because they are more visible. We would prefer to have the information before flowering, because it's much easier to manage in the field, because you don't have to wear the masks and the protections and so on. But still, it's interesting to have it before the seeds are released. So totally we have 98 populations that are managed. So that means either they are managed for the first time, either they have been managed every year, or they have been managed and eradicated, so we don't find plants anymore. So to have a general picture of that, I have this graphic that shows the cumulative number of populations over the 4 last seasons with their status. So in gray, you have the new populations, so the populations that are recorded during the year, and in green, you have the populations that we have eradicated. So if they are eradicated in 21, for instance, means that in 20 we managed them, and in 21 we didn't see any plants in these populations. But you can also see that there are persisting populations in red, and this number is increasing. Though if I remove the plants that we eradicated, the pattern changes a lot. So here you have an increase of the number of populations, but if we remove the plants, the populations that are eradicated, it becomes much flatter. We have roughly the same number of populations every year, even though the number of persisting population is still increasing. You can see that it's quite linear as well, 7, 10, 16, 22. So for sure, we are not rid with a ragweed in Wallonia, but still we managed to, thanks to the eradication of relatively small populations, because generally the persisting populations are larger populations, larger populations. But still, we managed to keep a high pressure on the species development and on the species curve. Of course, for this year, there is still uncertainty on the number of populations, because we might just find a few in the next days. Okay, so as a discussion and a conclusion, some words about this approach. So citizen science is efficient. We can tell that without this approach, for sure we wouldn't know that well the situation. So we definitely have much less populations to manage, because most of the populations are in private land. We could not even go in these area. Not all platforms are used equally. Some are really preferred by people. The observation.be, that is, let's say, a Belgian and Dutch platform, is really preferred by people because they have it on their smartphone, so they don't want to change, they don't want something else. They use what they are used to. And some platforms are better than others. iNaturalist and observation.be are really good. PlantNet, for instance, should ideally they would publish their data much earlier, so we could use them to fight the populations. Otherwise, we can only go the following year. So we have potentially a seed bank that is formed, and that's always a problem with ragweed. Another key aspect is that training is essential. Without training, you don't have that much data. You really need to explain to people that it's important. You have to explain them how to recognize the plant, ideally without the flowers. So it's not so easy. So you need to repeat the information to people, to managers, to botanists, to naturalists, and so on. And still, we have a picture based on those data, but there might be populations that we don't see. There are, for sure, populations that we don't see. So there is uncertainty. We don't have the reality. We just have the reality through the apps. This citizen science is part of a search and destroy strategy that is fruitful. It works quite well because it seems to prevent the exponential growth of the number of populations over time. So that's already a good achievement. But there are two limitations to that. The first is that we see that the persisting populations are increasing. So they accumulate through time. So it's more and more work in the field to manage those populations, because you have to take all these populations in consideration for management. So year after year, it's more and more to be done. And the data we collect also show that there are repeated introductions, because even after 4 years, we still find very small populations popping up, typically where there are bird seeds that are distributed to chicken, to wild birds, and so on. So we know that there are repeated introductions. So it might be an endless fight. So we managed to keep it under pressure, but certainly we will have to do it a long time, if not, let's say, forever. So thank you. I have finished my presentation. I will be happy to answer your questions.
So, yeah, I'm Franziska Zemmer. Thanks for this interesting presentation. So I live in a region where there is not much ragweed yet, but I was more, because you were talking about the repeated introductions, probably also the seed bank at where the population had been eradicated plays a role. So, you know, probably over years you will have to look, continue looking at that spot to be able to prevent ragweed fully.
Yeah, we do it. So when I say eradicated, it means that it might mean actually under good control, because we just didn't find any plants the year after. But ideally, we keep on going to these sites to look if there are no plants the second and the third year. The problem is that actually there is so many populations that are accumulating that we prefer to go where we know there are plants, and if we have time left, we go to these populations. So we are a bit overwhelmed with these populations. But when I say repeated introductions, it's in new places, when it's really a new site.
Now I understand. Yes, are you active only in your area, in Belgium?
For management, yes.
Do you know whether there are initiatives also in other countries of Europe like this?
Yes, for centralizing the data, the occurrence data, there is the French Observatory. There are, I think, also other initiatives. But the idea to search and destroy every population doesn't make sense everywhere. In places where there is a lot of ambrosia, you have to have a different strategy. And I'm not aware of this strategy based on citizen science somewhere else, but I would be happy to know about.
Yeah, well, I operate in Italy, and I was curious to learn more about the ambrosia management in Italy. Maybe other people who are present here can tell us more about that. I mean, but I know that it's a serious problem here. I mean, I operate in Trentino, which is basically at the Alps, southern part of the Alps, so closing in direction of the Po plain, let's say, and I can see that along river lines the plant is migrating towards north. So in Trentino there are not much signalations, not many records yet, but I fear if it's not managed at an early stage, as it is with every invasive plant, you know, it will the problem will just become more serious. Anyway, thank you again for your presentation. I will listen with pleasure to the answers.
Yeah, thank you. So yes, the fact is that with using citizen science, you are never sure if you train people to record, if the species increasing, or if just the records are increasing just because people record more. So it's a double trend. So that's a source of uncertainty. If you ask people to record in Trentino the ragweed, you might say, oh, there is much more than a few years before, just because people record what exists. So in my opinion, it's really difficult to make the separation between these two. But still, if you want to manage, you have to know where they are. So once you have a relatively good idea of the distribution, you can decide on a strategy and adapt your strategy over time, because it can also be changed based on the situation you find. Because if you find much more than you thought, you have to change. You will not reach eradication. I see that Victoria wants to say something.
Oh, now, just now my mic is on because I was trying for 3 times and closing, opening, changing programs through which I connected with you. I'm sorry. Just sorry, because I have a new meeting in 17 minutes, so I cannot wait very much for to have a talk. So I'm member of ARS, and we have a lot of ambrosia. Even I by myself saw a big ambrosia area just a couple of days ago near my country house, 100 meters. And what are you talking about, please? Just now I understood when I saw that who I can connect today with this meeting. And I saw that there is no many people who know ambrosia and know English at the same time. And now just I got that we have a perfect guy who is doing the same which you are doing in our country. And I just got ability to switch on my mic, but I'm not sure if I can share my screen because it's again not possible. And I can show you what service we do have in Ukraine. And probably I will need your contacts and to connect you with this guy. And probably we can do some collaboration because he won like some Google Prize for the same service for Ukraine.
Okay.
Just if Marilotte can give me opportunity to share my screen, I will share very quickly.
Yes, okay, we'll find you on the
Probably you will
list.
find some joint ideas because he's well English speaking guy. He's a programmer. He's not in Ukraine now, and he's somewhere abroad, but still.
I have to stop sharing my screen if you want to. Okay.
Yeah,
probably now you can share.
It's not.
I think you
it's
can
not
now.
possible for me.
I think now you can, Victoria, share your screen because I give you the right.
I will do so. Yes, I will do so. I'm working in this program. I'm teaching in this program. So I know it more or less, but now I entered like not by program, but by just link. So a little bit restricted possibilities. Here it is. This is the online map, which can be increased. And these are areas of ambrosia. And far as I understand, this green are probably like less areas. But people mostly do it around Kiev. This is the capital of our country. And
yeah,
this
that's
is
the bias.
What do you mean bias? What?
It means that when you sample, you don't sample everywhere. People sample where they are. So you have more information in urban areas. But I mean, that's like that. You cannot change it.
Yeah. But still now I showing you Ukraine like it is, and where people are really doing this ambrosia. And this guy sent me this map saying that you should also, I will add mine. But in Vinnytsia, we do not have people who are connecting. This is my city, almost nobody doing this job. This is right. But still, probably you can discuss with him. You are doing the same job, but for different countries. And I think it can be helpful for entire ambrosia community of the world.
Yes.
This collaboration of such people who are doing the same in different countries.
Yeah, and hopefully it will also end up in GBIF, certainly, because those data are collected like automatically. So everybody can have access to, sometimes not in real time, but can have access to everything, every data.
Yeah, we
but
have,
I wrote the
we can
website.
do European map or so. It's generally it's possible. I will also send the link to this service to the chat if you don't mind.
No, do it. But I wrote the website. It's the ambrosia.net.
Net means also not present. This is like word game, because in Russian or Ukrainian net nemaya also means this is absent. So they should put this ambrosia to make it absent in future, something like this. So this is double meaning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Laszlo, can you speak now? No? No, so maybe you should disconnect then reconnect. So hopefully it will work. So Bernard Clos has the question.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you, Arnaud, for your presentation. Very interesting, very good action. I can only confirm the efficiency of these control measures at very early stage of the invasion. That's exactly what the situation we were facing in Switzerland, say 25 years ago. And it was up to now very successful with the help of the population. Okay, at this time there was no app on the on the phones, but many people started to be concerned with ragweed, and we spread the word. And we also started to have regulations on ragweed. That is my question. Maybe I missed that, but do you have regulations to control ragweed in Belgium?
No, that's part of the problem. The species is not listed as being forbidden or something. So the regulation doesn't really help us to go in private land and say you have to remove it. And we already have some people who do not want us to control. It's not common, but some people say, no, I like this plant, I just want to keep it. And we have no force in terms of law. The only thing is that there is a European regulation on the contamination of bird seeds.
Mm-hmm.
So there are lots of seeds that are too contaminated. They can be stopped at the frontier and they cannot enter the land. But we also have shown that in bird seeds we can buy in Belgium, 1/3 of the bags of bird seeds are contaminated, but below the legal threshold. So it's useful, but it doesn't prevent all the introduction. But probably it would be worse without this regulation. So it helps us, but only for the introduction, to reduce the introduction, not for the management. It's only the goodwill of the people.
Okay. So if you can reach that, that
would be ideal. Yes,
I agree. Yeah.
But we have a brand new regulation on invasive species, but ragweed is not listed. It's not in the list.
Okay. If you need it, at one point we have 3 regulations, I think, in Switzerland about ragweed for the bird seeds, the same.
Yes.
And also for in the environment and in agriculture.
Okay.
So in agriculture, it helps the authorities to pay the farmers if we need to destroy their crops.
Okay.
In case of a huge invasion or something. Yeah. So it's also a tool to have the farmers on our side and not against.
Yeah, I didn't say it, but most of our populations are not in agricultural land. It's private gardens and along roads. Mostly.
Right. Thank you
Fortunately.
anyway. Yeah.
Okay, so Nebo has a question.
Yeah. Hi. Hello. I'm Nebojša Nikolić. I'm from the University of Padova, the FNAI department in Italy, and I was wondering if maybe using these different apps that you use for your project were you able, for example, to track the spread of Ambrosia, like the distribution patterns from the populations that you recorded maybe in 1 year, and also then in the subsequent years? Is it also possible maybe like to track the distribution from like the starting point and then forward in space?
Theoretically, it could be possible, but the fact is that ragweed is typically introduced through bird seeds, so it pops up in many places. So it's not a front that goes further and further. It's really popping up in different places, so you don't have a real pattern. But we do have a pattern in terms of repartition, because we have because of the topography, we have regions where the species is not well established. It's higher in altitude. It's a colder region, and there we don't find. So there is maybe 1/3 of the territory where we have no records, but the rest there is no. We might think of an invasion front, but it's not the case. It's really like a bit everywhere, and we don't have, let's say, patterns over time.
Okay, and just quickly, if I can just reply to Francisca. So in Italy, here we have the CIRFI, which is like the organization for the monitoring of the infested flora. We currently do not have anything about the monitoring of Ambrosia, but I mean, if you want, I'm here also. I see that the colleagues from Milano are here as well, so maybe we can start an initiative about this. So, thank you.
Thanks, Nebo. Any more questions? Marilu?
A quick one. Arnaud, did you try to ask PlantNet if they can send you the data in the summer or not?
It's my colleague who does that. I think he planned to do it, but I think it's a technical problem for the moment. They have only started publishing last winter, so yeah, this last winter, and so probably they will try to have it on a shorter delay. We can ask them, but I think it's a technical problem.
Okay. Thank you.
And for many research projects, you don't need the real-time information. You can just like every year make the synthesis and see the spread over time and so on. Here, it's just because we want to go there and manage. Otherwise, it's not a real problem. It's good. It's really good that PlantNet does publish the data in terms of coordinates. It's interesting. It's just a matter of season for us. It doesn't fit.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marilu. Anita, word is yours.
Yes, hi, thank you. Thank you for the great presentation. I'm from Zadar, Croatia, and we have the similar situation like you represented in Belgium. And I just wanted to ask you, do you have aerobiological data in your country? And the reason why I'm asking that is because if you have the aerobiological data, then those data can help you in understanding whether the increase of collected data is connected with citizen activity or maybe with the real spread of the Ambrosia plant.
Yeah.
And we thank you once again, and you just gave us a great idea for maybe doing something similar in our place.
Perfect. Yeah, that's a really good remark. And we do have pollen records in the air, but the problem actually is that we have so low level of pollen that when we have pollen, we think it comes from France or surrounding areas, and so it is so low that we cannot see a trend. It's idiosyncratic based on the winds across Europe. Because when we have a flowering peak in Belgium, we don't see this flowering peak in the pollen. It's still at the, I would say, it's still too low. It's a good thing from a public health point of view, but from an understanding of the process point of view, it's something we cannot really use. Otherwise, yes, we could see if the pollen increase over time with a different slope, but we don't see any trends over here. So it's just a few pollen grains during August and September, and that's it. So I had in my presentation, so I will not especially show again, but the number of pollen grains in 7 cubic meters of air ranges from 0 to 6.
Yes, but those are the data for the city, right?
In different places. There is a city, there is a rural area. We have 5 pollen stations. So, but there are places it's 0. So they don't record. Maybe in the future we will have more and we can make the distinction, but hopefully it's better like that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anita. Any more questions? If no more, I have. My first question would have been how effective the ragweed eradication programs are in Belgium. But your last figure answered very clear and impressively on this. Really, these are effective programs. Second question is how this eradication program influence the next year ragweed pollen concentrations?
For the eradication program, it works, but not fully, because we are still accumulating persisting populations. So I don't think we will get rid of a few very large populations, but it's still efficient. But in terms of pollen, it's the same answer as for Anita, because it is so low, with so few levels of pollen, we don't see trends. So there was almost no pollen before, and there is almost no pollen now. And so you cannot really see any trend, because it's really, actually there is a lot of zeros in the distribution of the data. So we tried with the aerobiology authority who make those measurements, but it's hard to see anything because it is too low.
Yes, in this case, as you mentioned, just to answer Anita's question, you mentioned that very low pollen concentrations are measured in Belgium. In this case, in the measured pollen concentrations, overwhelmingly much part include a long-distance pollen transport, and maybe most of the measured pollen concentration is long-distance transported.
Yeah.
Yes, not easy.
So yeah, it's like a noise that you cannot. You don't know if it's local pollen or airborne pollen from far away. It's probably possible to model the winds and things like that. I know that aerobiologists do that very well, but you still have uncertainty, and because it's so low, you are within the range, where you cannot tell.
Yes.
Much.
Thank you very much, Arnaud. Any more questions? If no, then thank you for all of you for your positive answer, presence, attendance, and I think we made a very useful and fruitful consultation, and thanks for the great presentation of Arnaud and for all of your questions. And I would like to tell you that this will be, as I mentioned at the very beginning, this will be a series of sessions. The next occasion will be held in October or November. We will discuss on it, and another presentation will be, and we are very welcome for your attendance next time also. Thank you very much again for your attendance.
Thank you very much for the organization and
Bye.
for the presentation. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.